Are you sure you came alone? She was bleeding, barely standing. One hand pressed against her side, the other gripping a weapon she should not have known how to hold. And the first words out of her mouth were not "help me," they were a warning, a test. The kind of question soldiers ask, not nurses. That night changed everything. Officer Ethan Walker thought he knew about courage, survival, and the quiet people who carry the heaviest secrets. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The call came in at 2:47 in the morning. Ethan Walker had been parked off Route 9 drinking his third cup of coffee and watching the empty road stretch out in front of him like a long black ribbon going nowhere. 11 years on the Silver Creek Police Department. 7 of those on nights. He knew every pothole, every dead traffic light, every shortcut between here and the county line. He knew which gas stations stayed open late and which drunks would stumble out of which bars on which nights of the week. I thought he knew everything about this town. He was wrong. The radio crackled with the kind of static that always came before something bad. All units, we have a report of a single vehicle accident on the access road near the old Hargrove Bridge. Caller reported seeing lights go over the embankment before the call dropped. No confirmed injuries, no other units in the area. Requesting response. Ethan set down his coffee. The Hargrove Bridge Road. That stretch had been closed to regular traffic for 3 years. The bridge itself was structurally condemned, fenced off, forgotten, the kind of place teenagers use for parties, and nobody else had a reason to visit at 2:47 in the morning. He reached for the radio. Dispatch, this is Walker. I'm on Route 9, maybe 8 minutes out. I'll take it. Copy, Walker. Proceed with caution. We've got nothing else on it. He pulled out of his spot and hit the lights without the siren. No reason to wake the whole county. Probably just some kid who missed the barrier. Probably nothing. He told himself that the whole drive over, he almost believed it. The access road to Hargrove Bridge was unpaved past the first half mile, and Ethan felt every rock and dip through his steering wheel as his cruiser pushed through the dark. His headlights cut through the brush on both sides, throwing long shadows that moved like something alive. He almost missed it. The ambulance was off the road and partially down the embankment, not far enough to roll, but enough that the front end was buried in the brush and the rear doors had sprung open. The vehicle's lights were still on, turning the darkness around it into a pulsing, sickly red. Ethan stopped his cruiser, killed the engine, and put his hand on his radio. Dispatch, I've got eyes on the vehicle. It's an ambulance, looks like Silver Creek regional markings on the side. Vehicle is off-road, driver's side down the embankment. I'm going to approach on foot. Stand by. Copy, Walker. Do you need backup? He looked at the ambulance. He looked at the road. He looked at the absolute pressing darkness all around him. Not yet, he said. Stand by. He got out of the car. The first thing he noticed was the silence. There were no sounds of anyone calling for help. No moaning, no movement inside the ambulance. Just the ticking of a cooling engine and the low electrical hum of equipment still trying to run inside the vehicle. He moved around the front of his cruiser with his flashlight in one hand and his other hand near his holster, not drawing, not yet, but ready. He'd been trained to approach accident scenes slowly to account for hazards, to look before he moved. He was 3 steps from the ambulance when he heard it. A sound, not from inside the vehicle, from somewhere to his left, back in the brush. A low, controlled exhale, the kind of sound a person makes when they are trying very, very hard not to make any sound at all. Ethan stopped walking. He turned his flashlight toward the sound, and the beam landed on her. She was sitting with her back against the concrete support of the bridge embankment, half hidden in the shadow of a low scrub brush. Both legs were stretched in front of her. Her left hand was pressed flat against her right side, just below her ribs, and even from 10 feet away, Ethan could see that the fabric of her uniform was soaked through, dark and wet and wrong. She was a nurse, or she had been before whatever happened here tonight. She was still wearing the uniform, light blue scrubs with the Silver Creek Regional Hospital logo on the chest pocket. Her blonde hair was loose and tangled, matted against her face on one side where she must have hit something. She was looking at him. Not in the terrified, desperate way accident victims usually looked at the first responder who found them, not with the wild eyes of shock or the glassy unfocus of someone about to pass out. She was looking at him the way a person looks when they are calculating every possible variable of a situation they don't yet fully trust. And she was holding a weapon. Not pointed at him, not yet. It was resting against her thigh, her right hand loosely wrapped around the grip. But loosely the way a person with real training holds a weapon when they need their hands free, not dropped, not forgotten, controlled, ready to come up in a fraction of a second. Ethan stopped walking. He kept his flashlight steady. He kept his voice even. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Ethan Walker, Silver Creek PD. I received a call about a vehicle accident. I'm here to help you." She didn't move. Her eyes moved a quick, practiced flicks to the road behind him, to the brush on his left, to the darkness beyond his cruiser's headlights. She was checking his perimeter. She was doing a threat assessment. A nurse who had just survived a crash, doing a threat assessment. "Are you sure you came alone?" Her voice was quiet, controlled. Not a trembling, frightened voice. A voice that had been pulled down to barely above a whisper, not because she was weak, but because she was being deliberate. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, something that had nothing to do with protocol. "Yes," he said, "just me. I'm the only unit in this area tonight." She held his gaze for 3 more seconds. 3 full seconds of absolute stillness while she made a decision about whether to believe him. Then she lowered the weapon. "Okay," she said. And then without any drama, without any warning, she said, "I need you to help me up. I think I've got a fractured rib and I've been losing blood for about 20 minutes. I know I'm not critical yet, but I need pressure on this wound, and I need to tell you something before we go anywhere." Ethan was already moving toward her, already pulling his first aid kit. "We can talk in the car. We need to get you to the hospital." "No." The word came out sharp, sharp enough to stop him mid-step. "Not the hospital. I can't go to the hospital. Not regional." He crouched down in front of her. This close, he could see the strain in her face, the tightness around her eyes, the pallor under her tan skin, the way she was breathing in the short, careful rhythm of someone managing real pain. "Ma'am, you're injured. You need medical." "My name is Claire Bennett." She met his eyes, and there was something there that he would spend weeks trying to describe afterward. Not fear. Something deeper and more complicated than fear. Something that looked like the weight of carrying something very heavy for a very long time. "I'm a nurse at Regional. I've been working there for 2 years, and somebody just tried to kill me." The words landed in the night air like stones dropped in still water. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. "The ambulance didn't go off the road by accident," Claire said. Her voice was still steady, still controlled, like she was giving a briefing. "It was runoff. A vehicle came up behind me, no lights, deliberately dark, and made contact twice. The second hit put me over. I managed to get out before it went further down. And then I heard the other vehicle stop on the road, and I heard doors open." She paused, swallowed. "They came down to check if I was dead. I made it to the brush before they got close enough to see me." Ethan looked at her. Then he looked at the ambulance. Then he looked at the road behind his cruiser, the long, dark stretch leading back toward town. "How many?" he said. "2, maybe 3. I couldn't see clearly." She shifted against the concrete, and for the first time the iron composure cracked just slightly, a sharp inhale, a brief tightening of her jaw. "They left when they saw the ambulance and apparently decided the job was done. But they might come back to confirm. Which means we have maybe 15 minutes before someone drives past and sees your lights." Ethan made a decision. He reached down and put his arm around her shoulders carefully on the uninjured side. "Okay," he said, "we're going to get you into my car, but you need to tell me where we're going, because I agree. If someone just tried to kill you, the last place I'm taking you is somewhere they'd expect." She let him help her up. She was taller than he'd expected, and the weight she put on him was carefully controlled. She was leaning exactly as much as she needed to, and no more. As they moved toward the cruiser, she said, "Is there anywhere in this town you trust completely? Somewhere not connected to the hospital or the department?" Ethan thought about it, really thought about it. "My place," he said finally. "It's off the grid, no connection to the department address. I never registered it officially." She processed that for exactly 1 second. "Okay," she said again. And that was it. That was the whole conversation. He helped her into the passenger seat, and as he closed the door and walked around to the driver's side, he looked back at the ambulance one more time. He could see now from this angle what he hadn't been able to see from the front. The rear bumper of the ambulance had been crushed inward. Not by hitting a barrier or a tree, by sustained deliberate impact from another vehicle. He got into the car. He drove. Duh. For the first 5 minutes, neither of them said anything. Ethan was running scenarios in his head. He was a patrol officer in a town of 12,000 people. His department had 17 officers and a chief who had never in 11 years dealt with anything more serious than a meth lab bust on the edge of town. He had no protocol for this, no supervisor to call, no detective to hand off to. He had a woman he didn't know bleeding in his passenger seat who had been carrying a weapon and doing tactical perimeter checks while apparently critically injured. He glanced at her. She had her left hand pressed firmly against her right side. Her eyes were open and watching the road ahead. Her breathing was regular and deliberate. "You should be in shock," he said. "I know," she said. "Most people after what you just described would be." "I know what most people would be." She said it without hostility, just fact. "I'm managing it." She turned to look at him. Breathing, controlled cognition. "Keeping my system from going into the cascade. It's something I learned how to do a long time ago." She paused. "Before nursing." There it was, that word, before. "What did you do before nursing?" Ethan asked. She looked back at the road. "Let's get to wherever we're going," she said quietly, "and then I'll tell you what you need to know." Ethan's house was 12 minutes from town on a 2-lane road that dead-ended at a tree line. It was a small house, 3 rooms, a deep porch, and a yard that backed up to nothing but open land. He'd bought it specifically because he liked the quiet and because the nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. He helped Claire inside and sat her at his kitchen table, the closest flat surface to the door. She took over immediately. "I need your first aid kit, any gauge pads you have, medical tape if you have it. I also need water and something with alcohol in it. Not rubbing alcohol, I mean actual alcohol, whatever you have in the house. I've got a first aid kit in the truck, full one. I've got whiskey in the cabinet." "That works." She was already pressing on the wound, assessing her hands, moving with a clinical precision that he would have expected from someone who had done this in a hospital 1,000 times, but not on herself. Not while also maintaining a conversation, not with this level of absolute calm. He got the first aid kit. He got the whiskey. She worked on herself while he held the flashlight and handed her what she asked for. She talked through what she was doing, not for his benefit, but apparently as a way of maintaining focus, a running quiet commentary. "Wound is a 3-inch laceration, not as deep as it felt. The rib is definitely cracked but not punctured. Bleeding is controlled, no immediate arterial involvement." When she was done, she sat back and looked at him. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," Ethan said. "Start talking." She told him the truth, not all of it, not immediately. She told it the way someone tells a story they have been carrying alone for a long time. Carefully, in the right order. She had grown up in Phoenix, she said. Smart girl, athletic, restless. She had gone into the military at 22 because she wanted something real, something that mattered. She had trained as a combat medic. 18 months of training that would have broken most people. She had deployed twice, once to a forward operating base in a region she named carefully and with the specific neutral tone of someone who had processed those memories into manageable compartments. She had done the job. She had done it well. She had brought people back from the edge of death in conditions that no hospital would ever replicate. She had come home at 28, and she had decided that she never wanted to hold a weapon again. So she had gotten her nursing certification. She had applied to regional hospitals, small ones, quiet ones in small towns. Places where the worst thing that happened was a farming accident or a car crash on an empty road. She had landed in Silver Creek 2 years ago, and she had thought, she had honestly believed that she had finally found the peace she was looking for. "Okay," Ethan said. He was sitting across from her at the table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he'd made without really thinking about it. "So you were a combat medic. What happened at the hospital?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "I need you to understand something first," she said. "When I tell you what I found, I need you to understand that I'm not guessing. I'm not being paranoid. I documented everything. I have proof." "Tell me." "It started small," she said. 3 months ago, I noticed discrepancies in the supply logs, medications going out without corresponding patient records, equipment being marked as used when I knew it hadn't been touched. Little things that individually don't mean anything, but that together form a pattern." She met his eyes. "I know what patterns look like. I was trained to find them." You reported it to my supervisor, who thanked me for my diligence and told me the discrepancies were being reviewed by administration. A brief pause. 2 days later, my locker was broken into. Nothing taken, but it had been searched. Very professionally. Someone who knew what they were doing. She said this without inflection. Just data. Then I noticed I was being followed. Not clumsily, not a car sitting outside my apartment. Professional surveillance. I only recognized it because I'd been on the other end of it overseas. Ethan set down his coffee mug very slowly. What did you do? He said. I kept working, Claire said, and I kept collecting evidence. Because at that point I understood that whoever was watching me already suspected I knew something. If I ran, they'd know for certain, and they'd move to cover their tracks before I could get anything to anyone who could use it. She looked at the table for a moment. I also started carrying again. The weapon, Ethan said. Yes. She looked back up at him. I hadn't carried in 6 years. I'd made a decision about that after I came home. But I understood that I was in a situation where the decision I'd made for my own peace of mind was going to get me killed. Ethan was quiet. Outside, there was nothing. No cars, no wind, no sound at all. The kind of silence that felt heavy. What are they moving, he said finally. Through the hospital. What's the operation? Medical supplies, equipment. But the supply chain is a shell. What's actually moving through it? She paused, chose her words. I don't have the complete picture yet. I have 3 months of documentation, enough to open a federal investigation. But I don't have the final piece. The person at the top. Do you have a suspicion? She looked at him steadily. I have more than a suspicion, she said. But I want to be careful about saying a name until I have everything locked down. Because if I say the wrong name to the wrong person and I'm wrong, she stopped. Then, or if I'm right and the person I tell is already compromised. The words landed like a cold hand on the back of his neck. The person I tell is already compromised. You don't know if you can trust me, Ethan said. I didn't know, she said quietly. Before tonight. You're the officer who showed up alone on an unmarked road at 3 a.m. to respond to an anonymous call. You could have been sent. You could have been part of it. But you got in my car, he said. I got in your car, she agreed, because I watched you walk toward that ambulance. And I watched the way you moved. A pause that felt significant. You weren't expecting trouble. You were just doing your job. Someone sent to finish the job would have moved differently. Ethan absorbed this. You read all of that, he said, from watching me walk across a field in the dark. I read people, she said simply. It's what I was trained to do, and it's what kept me alive tonight. The kitchen clock ticked. Okay, Ethan said. He leaned forward, putting both elbows on the table. Here's where I'm at. You've been attacked. Someone tried to kill you. That means there's a criminal investigation, and as a law enforcement officer, I have an obligation to report it to your department, Claire said. I know. Her voice was careful now, which is why I need to ask you something honestly. Ask, how well do you know the people in your department? All of them. Everyone. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. Because the truth was, and he didn't want it to be the truth, but the truth was that he knew his colleagues the way anyone knows people they work alongside without truly knowing. He knew their habits, their routines, their names and histories. But he didn't know their finances. He didn't know their outside associations. He didn't know who they talked to or what they owed. He thought about his chief, a man he'd worked under for 7 years. And for the first time, he felt genuinely uncertain. What are you suggesting? He said. I'm not suggesting anything, Claire said. I'm telling you that the people behind this have been operating in Silver Creek for at least 2 years without being caught. That means they have some level of protection, some way of being insulated from investigation. She held his gaze. That protection has to come from somewhere. The silence stretched. Then Ethan said, we need to know what we're dealing with before we move. Agreed. Agreed. And you have documentation, physical documentation. An encrypted file, she said, on a device that is not in the ambulance, not at my apartment. It's in a location I chose specifically because it's not connected to me in any obvious way. Okay. He exhaled slowly. Okay. So we have tonight to figure out a next move. And right now, as far as anyone knows, you're still down there in that brush. Yes. Which means we have a window. Yes. He looked at her across the kitchen table. A nurse who moved like a soldier, A woman who had rebuilt herself twice over, and who was now sitting in a stranger's kitchen, bleeding carefully and calmly into a gauze pad because she had refused to let herself die before she could finish what she'd started. "Get some sleep," he said. "A few hours. You need it, and you know it." She started to shake her head. "I'll watch," he said. "I'm serious. You can't function like this. You know you can't. A few hours." She looked at him for a long moment, the kind of look that measures a person. "3 hours," she said finally. "3 hours," he agreed. She stood slowly and he moved to help her. She accepted it this time without hesitation, less because she needed it and more he sensed because she had made a decision to trust him, and trust meant allowing for the gesture. As she moved toward the small back room where he'd pointed earlier, she stopped in the doorway and turned back. "Ethan," she said. It was the first time she'd used his name. "Yeah. Thank you for coming alone." He didn't have an answer for that, so he just nodded. She disappeared into the dark of the hallway, and he sat back down at the kitchen table and looked at the door and held his mug of cooling coffee and thought about everything he thought he knew about the people around him, and how little of it he realized he could actually be certain of. The night outside his window was perfectly still. He sat at that table for a long time. He didn't sleep. He thought about the ambulance on the embankment and the way its bumper had been crushed, and the practiced quiet of the woman who had survived what had been done to it. He thought about the question she'd asked him when he first found her. "Are you sure you came alone? Not help me. Not thank God you're here. Not any of the things people said when they were frightened and grateful and overwhelmed. Just that question, that specific, careful, tactical question." He thought about what kind of person asked that question in that moment, and the answer that kept coming back to him was someone who has been in situations where the wrong answer meant death. I thought about Silver Creek, the hospital at the center of town, the corridors he'd walked 100 times bringing in accident victims or coming by to follow up on a case, the staff he'd nodded to, the executives he'd seen at community events. He thought about all of it differently now, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought began to take shape that he didn't want to look at directly yet, but that he knew he was going to have to face. Whoever had done this, whoever had put a vehicle behind an ambulance on a dark road and pushed it off a bridge, they had known that Claire would be on that ambulance. They had known her route, they had known her schedule. That kind of information came from inside. It came from someone who had access to the hospital's dispatch and scheduling systems. It came from someone with authority, with cover, with the ability to arrange things without being questioned. It came from someone everyone trusted. Ethan set his coffee mug down very carefully on the table. Outside, the stars were beginning to fade at the very edge of the sky. Dawn was 3 hours away. He sat in the silence of his kitchen, and he waited for it, and he did not sleep, and he did not stop thinking about the quiet woman in his back room who had survived being killed tonight, and who had called it in the flattest, most matter-of-fact tone he had ever heard. "Someone just tried to kill me," like it was a fact she had already integrated. Like it was something she had on some level already been prepared for. That was the thing that stayed with him through the long, still hours before the light came. Not the crash, not the weapon, not even the secret she carried. The fact that she had not been surprised. She was awake before he heard her move. That was the first thing that told him something was different about Claire Bennett. Not the sound of her waking. There was no sound, no creak of the bed, no shuffle of feet, no groggy pause in the doorway the way normal people had when they woke in an unfamiliar place. One moment the hallway was dark and empty. The next moment she was standing in the kitchen doorway, fully alert, her eyes scanning the room, the way they had scanned the darkness outside the ambulance. Quick, systematic, left to right, threat assessment, complete, before she'd even said a word. She was still pale. The gauze pad taped to her side had a faint red bloom at the center that hadn't been there 3 hours ago, but it wasn't spreading fast. She had her arms loose at her sides. She looked at Ethan sitting at the kitchen table where she'd left him, and something moved across her face, not quite surprise, but something close to it. "You didn't sleep," she said. "No, you should have." "Yeah." He pushed his second mug of coffee across the table toward the chair across from him. "I made that an hour ago. It's probably not great." She sat down and picked up the mug anyway and drank without checking the temperature first, like someone whose relationship with comfort had become entirely functional. She drank because her body needed it, not because it was pleasant. He had noticed that about her the night before too, the way she did everything without ceremony. No hesitation, no softening, Just the action, clean and direct. How's the rib? He asked. Manageable. She set the mug down. It's cracked, not broken through. The laceration is superficial. I'll live. A pause. Oh, how long until someone notices the ambulance? Dawn Patrol runs Route 9 around 6:30. They'll see the barrier's been moved on the access road. He checked the clock on the wall. That's maybe 90 minutes from now. So we have 90 minutes before this becomes official, she said. Yes. He looked at her steadily, which means I need to know everything you know. Right now. All of it. She looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked up at him. Where do you want me to start? Start with what you found, he said. Not the beginning, not the background. The evidence. What do you actually have? She had been collecting for 11 weeks. That was the first thing she told him. 11 weeks of documentation gathered carefully, methodically, in the way someone gathers evidence, when they know that the moment they stop being careful is the moment everything falls apart. She told him she had started a log the day after her supervisor dismissed her first report. A private log kept in an encrypted file on a device that never connected to the hospital's network and never left her possession. She told him she had photographed supply records. She had made copies of patient logs that showed discrepancies between medications administered and medications ordered. She had documented dates times quantities and the names attached to each transaction. How much are we talking? Ethan asked. In terms of what's been moved. She thought for a moment. Over 18 months, and I'm estimating based on the pattern, not the total records, I think the operation has moved somewhere between $2 and $3 million worth of controlled medical supplies. The number sat between them on the table. That's not small time, Ethan said. No, she agreed. It's not. This isn't someone skimming a few boxes of medication for personal use. This is a structured system. Someone built it carefully. Someone with access to the hospital's procurement network, the scheduling systems, the patient records, all of it. Someone who understood how the institution works from the inside. An executive, Ethan said. She didn't confirm it, not yet. She kept her eyes on the table. The supplies are being routed through a legitimate-looking distribution channel, she said. On paper, it looks like standard hospital procurement supplies going out to affiliate facilities, partner clinics, regional distribution centers. But the affiliate facilities don't exist. The partner clinics are shells. The supplies are being moved and resold somewhere in the pipeline between the hospital and a fictitious destination. Ethan leaned back in his chair. He pressed his hands flat against the table. He was a patrol officer. He understood street crimes, domestic situations, traffic stops, the occasional breaking and entering. He did not understand financial fraud or supply chain manipulation, or the infrastructure of a multi-million-dollar criminal operation running through a small-town hospital. But he understood people. And he understood that the woman sitting across from him had spent 11 weeks risking her life to build a case that most people would have run from in week one. The device, he said, the one with the encrypted file. Where is it? Safe, she said. Claire. She looked at him. I need to know something first. What? Last night when dispatch sent you to Hargrove Bridge, was that a routine call? Did anyone else in your department know you were going? He thought about it. Dispatch logged the call, standard procedure. Anyone monitoring department communications would have known I was responding. Anyone monitoring, she repeated. Is that a system that outside parties can access hospital administrators? For example, people with institutional connections to emergency services. The answer was yes. He didn't want it to be. But the Regional Emergency Communications Network had been integrated with the hospital's critical response system 3 years ago, part of a county-wide modernization initiative that he had sat through a 45-minute presentation about and immediately forgotten because it had seemed at the time entirely irrelevant to his daily work. It was not irrelevant now. Someone could have monitored dispatch and known I was the responding unit, he said quietly. And if they had intended to send someone to confirm that I hadn't survived. She stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Ethan felt cold. They would have known a cop was already on scene, he said. Which is probably why nobody came, Claire said. If someone was monitoring, they saw a patrol unit respond, and they decided to wait, to see what happened. She wrapped her hands around the mug again. They're going to find the ambulance soon. And when they do, they're going to realize there's no body. And then they're going to realize I got out. How long before they start looking For me specifically, the moment the ambulance is found and I'm not in it. She met his eyes. I need the device, and I need to get the evidence to someone who can actually use it before whoever did this last night has time to start covering their tracks. Who did you have in mind? Ethan asked. Federal, she said immediately. FBI or DEA, not local, not county, not state, because state systems have the same integration vulnerabilities as the county network. She paused. I have a contact. Someone I served with, she left the military and went into federal law enforcement. I haven't spoken to her in 2 years, but I kept the number. Does she know what you've been doing? No, I didn't tell anyone. A brief pause. I couldn't tell anyone. If I'd brought someone else in and that person had any connection to the hospital or to anyone connected to the hospital, you'd have handed them a reason to move faster, Ethan said. Yes. He stood up from the table, walked to the window, looked out at the pre-dawn gray that was beginning to soften the darkness at the far edge of the property. He stood there for a moment with his hands in his pockets, thinking about all of it, the ambulance, the evidence, the encrypted file, the name. She was still not saying. Then he turned around. I want the name, he said. The person at the top. You said you have more than a suspicion. Claire was quiet. Claire, his voice was even. I can't help you if I'm operating blind. I need the full picture. She looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look that is not doubt. It is the final check before a decision that cannot be undone. The kind of look that a person makes when they know that saying a name out loud is the moment everything becomes real and dangerous in a way that cannot be walked back. Dr. Vincent Harper, she said. The name dropped into the quiet kitchen like a stone. Ethan didn't move. He knew that name. Everyone in Silver Creek knew that name. Dr. Vincent Harper, 54 years old, chief executive of Silver Creek Regional Hospital. The man who had overseen the hospital's expansion 5 years ago, who had personally lobbied the county for increased emergency services funding, who appeared at every community event and donated to every local charity and was photographed shaking hands with the mayor 3 times a year. The man who was by every visible measure one of the most trusted people in town. Harper, Ethan said, yes, you're sure. His signature is on the procurement authorizations, she said. Not directly, it's been layered, but when you trace the authorization chain back through the shells, every path leads to a set of accounts and approvals that can only have originated from his office, with his credentials, under his oversight. She held his gaze. He built the system to be insulated, but he made one mistake. What mistake? He trusted the people under him to be as careful as he was. For the first time, something moved across her face that wasn't composure. It was something harder and older and more personal. One of his people kept a secondary record, a backup, something they thought was insurance in case Harper ever tried to cut them out. She paused. I found it in a server partition that was supposed to have been deleted 8 months ago. And Harper doesn't know you found it. He knows I know something. He doesn't know how much. She looked down at her hands. Or he didn't know until last night. Last night tells me he's decided the risk is too high to wait and find out. Ethan came back to the table. He sat down. The device, he said again. We need it today, before the ambulance is found, before he knows you're alive and starts moving to cover everything. She looked at him. I know. Where is it? She took a breath. There's a storage unit on the east edge of town. Unit 44. She stopped, reached up and pressed 2 fingers against the inside of her left wrist, a reflex gesture, half hidden, like touching something that was there out of habit. Then she seemed to realize she'd done it and lowered her hand. The key is at the hospital, in my locker. He stared at her. At the hospital. I know. Claire, the one place we can't go is... I know, she said again, and her voice had an edge to it. Now, not frustration with him, but frustration with the situation, the kind of helpless anger that comes from seeing a trap you walked into before you understood it was there. I didn't anticipate needing to retrieve it this fast. I had a plan. It was a careful plan. And then last night happened before I was ready. Okay. He made himself slow down. Think. Your locker. Is there anyone at the hospital you trust with your life? Someone completely outside the administrative structure. Housekeeping, maintenance, someone low enough on the hierarchy that Harper would have no reason to involve them, she thought. He could see her running through faces, names, histories. Then something changed in her expression. Rosa, she said. Who's Rosa? Rosa Delgado. She's been in housekeeping at Regional for 14 years. She's the one who, when my locker was broken into, the first time she's the one who told me. She came to find me personally instead of reporting it to security. She said she didn't trust the security supervisor. Claire paused. She's never asked me why. She just watched out for me. Small things, warnings. Does she have access to the nursing staff lockers? Housekeeping has master access to most areas during off-peak hours. Early morning shifts at 5:30. She looked at the clock. She'd be there now. Do you have her number? I have her on my work phone, which is in the ambulance. He thought, then he pushed his personal cell across the table. Hospital's main number is 520 area code. I know that much. You can call through the main line and ask them to connect to housekeeping. If the call is logged and someone is monitoring, it'll look like a misdial or a patient calling the wrong extension. You're listed as missing right now, not confirmed dead. They don't know where you are. He held her gaze. It's a risk, but sitting here waiting for the ambulance to be found is also a risk. She looked at the phone, then back at him. Okay, she said, and she picked up the phone. Rosa Delgado answered on the second ring. Ethan watched Claire's face change the moment the other woman's voice came through the line, a brief involuntary softening that lasted only a fraction of a second before composure reasserted itself. He understood it. Rosa was one of the only people in this situation who represented something uncorrupted. Rosa, Claire's voice was quiet and steady. It's Claire Bennett. I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to not react visibly to what I'm about to say. Are you somewhere you can talk? A pause on the line. Then very quietly, see, I'm in the East Wing corridor, alone. Rosa, I need you to go to my locker number 14C in the nurse's changing room on the second floor. The combination is 72291. Inside on the left side under my extra set of scrubs, there's a small key on a plain ring. No tag. I need you to take that key and I need you to leave the hospital with it. Don't tell anyone. Don't log out of your shift. Just go. Take your personal things and go. Silence on the line. Then Rosa said in a voice so low it was barely audible, Miss Claire, are you safe? I'm working on it, Claire said. Something happened last night, Rosa said. It wasn't a question. I heard people talking this morning. About the ambulance. About you. A pause. They said you might be that they were looking for. I'm alive, Claire said. But I need that key. Can you do this? Another silence. Ethan could feel the weight of it. A woman on the other end of the line, 14 years in the same building, being asked to walk out of her job with no explanation by someone who might, as far as the hospital was concerned, not be alive. I'll get it, Rosa said. Simple as that. Thank you, Claire said. I'll send someone to meet you. A police officer named Ethan Walker. You can trust him. He'll come to the east side entrance in about 30 minutes. He'll be in a dark blue civilian truck. Okay, Rosa said, and then very quietly, Dios la cuide. Claire closed her eyes for a fraction of a second when she ended the call. Just a fraction. Then she set the phone down. 30 minutes, she said. I heard. Ethan was already standing. You stay here. Ethan, you're injured. You're officially a missing person, and if anyone sees your face before we have that evidence, secured, this whole thing collapses. He picked up his keys. Stay, rest. I'll be back in an hour. She looked at him. He could see the tension in her, the need to be the one moving, the one acting, the one in control of her own situation. He understood it. He would have felt the same. 1 hour, she said finally. 1 hour, he confirmed. I was at the door when she said his name. He stopped. If something goes wrong, she said, if you're not back in 90 minutes, the storage unit is on Kern Road. Unit 44. The contact's name is Special Agent Dana Reyes. She's out of the Phoenix field office. You tell her my name and she'll listen. She paused. Everything is on that device. He looked at her across the kitchen. Nothing's going to go wrong, he said. She held his gaze. I know, she said. But the way she said it was the way people say it when they have survived enough situations to know that nothing is ever certain, and they say it anyway, because certainty is what people need to hear when they are walking out the door. He left. Rosa Delgado was exactly where she said she would be. She was a small woman, 50, maybe 55, with careful eyes and the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades being invisible inside an institution. She was standing at the east side entrance with her coat on and her bag over her shoulder. And when Ethan pulled up and rolled down the window, she looked at him for exactly 2 seconds before she made her decision. She got in. She held out the key without saying anything. I took it. Thank you. Are you all right? Did anyone see you leave? No, she looked straight ahead through the windshield. I have been at that hospital for 14 years, she said quietly. And I have seen many things I should have said something about and didn't, because the people who saw things and said something, they didn't stay. A pause. I am glad Miss Claire is alive. Me too, Ethan said. He drove. The storage facility on Kern Road opened at 5:30 in the morning, which meant by the time Ethan arrived, the gate was already unlocked and the overnight attendant was half asleep in the booth at the entrance. Ethan drove through without stopping. Unit 44 was in the back row. I used the key. The door rolled up on a space that was mostly empty, a few boxes stacked against the left wall folding table. On the table, wrapped in a plain dark cloth, was a device about the size of a paperback novel. He picked it up. He stood there in the silence of the storage unit, holding 11 weeks of a woman's courage in both hands, and he thought about how small it was, how ordinary it looked, how completely impossible it would have seemed even 48 hours ago that he would be standing here at 6 in the morning, holding something that might be the only thing standing between justice and the kind of powerful person who could make a woman disappear. He wrapped it carefully and put it in his jacket pocket and drove back. Claire was standing in the kitchen when he walked in. Not sitting, standing. She had been doing something when she heard him pull up. He realized some kind of deliberate movement, some form of the controlled exercise that people who have lived in their bodies as tools use to maintain function. She had gone still the moment she heard the engine. She looked at his jacket pocket. He took the device out and set it on the table. She looked at it for a moment. Something moved through her expression that was complicated and deep and not entirely comfortable to look at the expression of a person confronting the physical reality of something they've been carrying as an abstraction for a very long time. Then she sat down and reached for it. Okay, she said. Now I need to reach Dana. Use my phone, he said. She shook her head. Not from a traceable number. I need a burner, or a line that can't be connected to either of us. Ethan thought for exactly 3 seconds. I know someone, he said. She looked up. His name is Victor Hayes, Ethan said. He runs a motorcycle club out of a property on the northwest edge of town. The Hells Angels chapter. Before you say anything, I know how that sounds. But I've dealt with Victor for 6 years. He's not a simple man, but he has a personal code, and 2 years ago he helped me get information on a situation that I could not have cracked through official channels. He paused. He has the kind of communications infrastructure that doesn't run through anything the hospital or the department can touch. Claire was quiet for a moment. You want to bring a motorcycle club into a federal evidence situation, she said carefully. I want to make one phone call that can't be monitored, he said. Victor doesn't need to know what the call is for. He just needs to lend me a line. She thought about it. He could see her running the math, the risk of involving someone unknown versus the risk of using traceable communications at the worst possible moment. How fast can you reach him? She said. Victor is awake at 5 in the morning every day, Ethan said, without exception. She nodded. Once. Go. He was already reaching for his keys. Then his radio crackled from where he'd left it on the kitchen counter, the department issue unit that he hadn't turned off. And the voice that came through it turned everything that had been moving fast into something that moved much, much faster. All units, we have a confirmed report of a vehicle accident on the Hargrove Bridge Access Road. Silver Creek Regional Ambulance, located approximately 60 feet off, road driver missing. All units respond. Note hospital administration has been notified and is requesting an immediate status report on crew member Claire Bennett, last seen on shift at Regional at approximately 2100 hours last night. Consider missing, not confirmed injured. The radio went quiet. Ethan looked at Claire. Claire looked at the device on the table. They know, she said, not panicked, not surprised, just stating the fact the way she stated everything clearly and without flinching. And whoever called the hospital administration called them fast. Faster than a normal missing person's notification would go. Which means someone was waiting for the ambulance to be found, Ethan said. Which means someone knew exactly where to look, she said. Which means Harper knows you're not dead, Ethan finished. She stood up from the table. She picked up the device and held it. We have less time than I thought, she said. Call your contact now. He was already moving. And somewhere across town, behind a desk in an office that looked over a parking lot full of staff cars and ambulances and all the ordinary machinery of a hospital that was supposed to be about healing people, a man whose name was known and trusted by everyone in Silver Creek was making a phone call of his own. And the call he was making was not to emergency services. Victor Hayes picked up on the first ring. Walker, the man said. His voice was the kind of voice that came from living hard and surviving it low, direct without warmth, but also without hostility. Just the sound of someone who had decided a long time ago to conserve energy by saying only what needed to be said. It's 6 a.m. I know, Ethan said. He was parked 2 blocks from his own house, windows up, radio off. I need a favor, the serious kind. A pause. How serious? I need a clean line. Nothing traceable. Nothing connected to me or the department. Another pause, longer this time. The sound of a man recalculating something. You in trouble, Victor said. Not me, Ethan said. Someone I'm trying to help. Someone who did the right thing and nearly got killed for it. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Ethan started to wonder if he'd miscalculated. Victor Hayes was not a man who did things without understanding them. He was also not a man who turned his back on a situation that met his particular definition of unjust. Come to the compound, Victor said finally. Bring whoever you're helping. She's injured. I've got someone who can look at that. He paused. Come now, Walker, before the town wakes up all the way. The call ended. Ethan sat in his truck for a moment. Then he drove back to his house. When he walked through the door, Claire was standing exactly where he'd left her, upright alert, the device in her hand. She looked at him and read the answer on his face before he said a word. We're going, she said. We're going, he confirmed. She was already moving. And that was the thing about Claire Bennett that Ethan was beginning to understand more fully with every passing hour. The thing that went beyond the training, beyond the military background, beyond the combat medicine, and the tactical awareness, and the capacity to do a threat assessment while bleeding in the dark. The thing was this: she had survived this long, not because she was stronger than the people hunting her, or smarter or better equipped. She had survived because she had never, not for a single moment since this started, allowed herself the luxury of stopping. They went to the truck. They drove. And the town of Silver Creek, just beginning to wake to the gray light of an ordinary Thursday morning, had no idea what was about to come apart inside it. Victor Hayes lived by 3 rules. He had told Ethan this once 2 years ago over a cup of black coffee at the compound after Ethan had come to him for information on a situation that had no clean official solution. The 3 rules were simple: never lie to a man's face, never abandon someone who can't defend themselves, and never under any circumstances let a powerful person use their power to hurt someone who has nothing left to lose. Ethan had remembered those rules. He was counting on them now. The compound was already active when they arrived, a handful of men moving around the yard with the particular efficiency of people who kept early hours, not because they were told to, but because they had built their lives around the discipline of it. Several of them looked up when Ethan's truck came through the gate. None of them said anything. They just watched with the flat, assessing calm of men who had seen enough unusual things arrive at unusual hours to have stopped being surprised by it. Victor met them at the truck. He was a big man, not tall, but wide through the shoulders, with a face that had been rearranged by life into something that was more like a landscape than a face. He had gray at his temples and a short beard and hands that looked like they had been used hard for decades. He was wearing a plain flannel shirt, and he was drinking coffee, and he looked at Claire the way people look at someone when they are making a very rapid and very serious calculation about what kind of person they are dealing with. Claire looked back at him the same way. It lasted about 4 seconds. Then Victor said, "You the nurse?" "Yes," Claire said. "You look like hell," he said without any particular unkindness. "Just observation. I've had a difficult night," she said. Something shifted almost imperceptibly in Victor's expression. Not quite a smile, but the precursor to one. "Come inside," he said, and then over his shoulder to a man who had appeared silently at his right, "Get Doc. Tell him we've got a cracked rib and a laceration." I already treated the laceration, Claire said. I heard you, Victor said. He kept walking. Doc's going to check your work. She followed him. Ethan followed her. The inside of the compound's main building was nothing like what someone who had never been inside one would expect. It was functional and clean in the way that spaces maintained by people who actually lived in them were clean, not pristine, not decorated, but organized with the logic of use. There was a long table in the main room, and Victor sat at the head of it and pointed to chairs, and Ethan and Claire sat down. Victor looked at Claire. Talk, he said. She talked. She gave him the short version, not abbreviated out of distrust, but because Claire Bennett was constitutionally incapable of wasting words. She told him about the supply operation, about Harper, about the 11 weeks of documentation in the ambulance, and the night before. She told it flat and clear, and without asking for anything until she reached the end. Then she said, I need a clean communication line to reach a federal agent in Phoenix, and I need it in the next 2 hours before whoever tried to kill me last night realizes I'm still alive and starts moving to destroy the evidence trail. Victor had not interrupted her once. He sat with his coffee for a moment after she finished. Harper, he said. Yes. Vincent Harper, the one who cut the ribbon on the new pediatric wing last spring. The same. Victor was quiet. Something moved behind his eyes that was not surprise. It was more like the grim recognition of a thing you suspected, but hadn't yet confirmed. We've had 2 members in the past year go through regional, he said. Both of them came out with prescription complications that nobody could explain. One of them, he stopped. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We looked into it, couldn't get anywhere. He set his mug down on the table. Now I'm wondering. Ethan watched Claire watch Victor, and he watched the moment when she understood, when she put together what Victor was saying and what it meant. The supply manipulation wasn't only external, she said slowly. If the controlled medications being diverted were also being substituted or diluted inside the hospital. People were getting the wrong thing, Victor said. His voice was very flat now. Or not enough of the right thing. The table went quiet. This was the thing about corruption. Ethan thought it in the silence of that moment. It was never contained. It was never one crime, one victim, one consequence. It grew. It spread through every system it touched, like something biological taking from whoever was in reach, without distinction, without awareness of the specific human cost of each individual transaction. 2 men had gone through Silver Creek Regional and come out wrong, and they had not known why, and nobody had answered for it, and it had simply been absorbed into the general category of things that happened and couldn't be explained. Until now. Use whatever you need, Victor said to Claire. He said it directly and without ceremony, the way he apparently made all decisions. Line equipment people, whatever you need to get this to the right people. Claire looked at him. Why, she said, not suspiciously, genuinely. She was a person who needed to understand the reason behind a decision, and she asked the question without apology. Because the man running that hospital hurt people I care about and never had to answer for it, Victor said. And because you spent 11 weeks collecting proof while people were trying to kill you, and you're sitting here with a cracked rib asking me for a phone line instead of asking me to burn the whole thing down. He held her gaze. I respect that. They reached Special Agent Dana Reyes at 6:47 in the morning. Ethan stood near the wall of the communications room while Claire sat at the table with the device in front of her and waited through 2 rings, 3, 4, and then a voice answered. That was sharp and awake, in a way that told him this was not a person who had been asleep. Reyes. Dana. Claire's voice was steady. It's Claire Bennett. A pause on the line. Brief 1 second, maybe less. Then Claire. Where are you? Safe for now. She paused. I need you to listen. All of it. Don't ask me questions until I'm done. Okay, Dana said. No pushback. No protocol. Just okay. Claire laid it out. All of it. Everything she'd told Ethan, everything she'd told Victor, plus the details she'd been holding back even from them. The specific shell companies. The authorization chain she'd traced. The secondary records she'd found in the deleted server partition. The name at the end of every trail. She talked for 14 minutes without stopping. When she finished, the line was quiet for 3 seconds. Then Dana said, Do you have the device with you right now? Yes. How's the encryption? Military grade. I use the same protocol we used in bomb. Claire stopped. glanced at Ethan. The same one we both know. Okay. The sound of movement on the other end, rapid, decisive. Someone already on their feet. I need you to not move. I need you to stay exactly where you are. I'm going to make 2 calls, and then I'm calling you back on this number. How long? 10 minutes. A pause. Claire, this is real. What you built, this is enough. Claire closed her eyes. It was the only moment in the entire time Ethan had known her, which was now approximately 4 hours, that he saw something crack through the surface in a way that was purely involuntary. Not grief, not relief. Something more like the physical sensation of having held something very heavy for a very long time and being told for the first time that you could set it down. It lasted 1 second, then she opened her eyes and the composure was back. 10 minutes, she said, and she ended the call. Stop. The call back came in 9. We're moving, Dana said without preamble. I've got authorization for a federal response. We're going to need you to transmit the file. I'm sending you a secure upload protocol now. Once we have the data on our end, we've got enough to pull warrants. How many warrants? Claire asked. As many as it takes. A brief pause. I'm also coordinating with the Phoenix DEA field office. Based on what you've described, the supply chain operation is going to fall under their jurisdiction as well as ours. Ethan, who had been standing against the wall listening, straightened up slightly. He caught Victor's eye across the room. Victor was leaning against the far wall with his arms crossed, and his expression said nothing at all, which was how Ethan had learned to read when Victor was actually paying very close attention. There's a timing problem, Claire said into the phone. The hospital administration has already been notified that I'm missing. Someone made that notification faster than normal procedure would account for, which means there's communication happening internally that's connected to whoever tried to kill me last night. If Harper knows federal is moving before the warrants are executed, he'll have time to... I know, Dana said. We're working fast. But I need that file, Claire. The moment I have it, I can move. Claire looked at the device. She picked it up. She turned it over in her hands just once, a small gesture that Ethan suspected she wasn't entirely aware of making. 11 weeks in that device. 11 weeks of early mornings and late nights in paranoid, careful movements. In the particular loneliness of being the only person in a room who knows what the room is actually for. She started the transmission. It took 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Ethan knew because he watched the clock on the wall the entire time, aware that every second that passed was a second in which someone across town could be making a decision that would change what happened next. He thought about Harper in his office. He thought about the morning routine of a man who had built a careful criminal enterprise inside a legitimate institution, who had done it so well that nobody had found it for 18 months. He thought about what that man's morning looked like today, with an ambulance off a bridge and a missing nurse and a patrol officer who hadn't reported back to the department since responding to the call at Hargrove Road. The transmission completed. I have it, Dana said. Her voice had changed slightly. There was something underneath the professional tone, now something that sounded like controlled urgency moving very fast. Claire, she stopped. This is considerably more than I expected. I know, Claire said. The secondary records you found, the ones from the deleted partition. There are names in here I wasn't expecting. Something in Claire's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Which names? A pause on Dana's end. The kind of pause that means the next sentence is being chosen very carefully. Harper's not the only executive, Dana said. There are 2 other hospital administrators in the secondary records with direct authorization trails. And there's another pause. Claire, there's a county official in here. The room changed temperature. Not literally, but the quality of the silence changed, thickened. Which official? Claire said. Her voice had gone very quiet. Dana said a name. Ethan's head came up. I knew that name. He knew it because he had attended 3 departmental briefings in the past year in which that name had come up in the context of the county emergency services budget. A budget that included, among other things, funding for the regional communications network integration, allowed whoever was monitoring communications to know he was the responding unit at Hargrove Road. The same integration that had given them a window to send someone to confirm Claire was dead. County official with Harper had helped build the system that had been used to try to kill her. Dana, Ethan said. He stepped forward. He knew she could hear him. This is Ethan Walker. I'm the officer who found Claire last night. The county official you just named, They have direct administrative access to the regional emergency communications network. If they know Federal is moving, they'll know when we hit the warrants, Dana said. She was moving, he could hear it, the background sounds of rapid organized motion, which is why we're executing simultaneously. All locations, same time. But Walker, I need something from you. What? I need you to stay off department communications. Don't radio in, don't call, dispatch, don't contact your chief. Not until we tell you it's clear. The implication of that settled over him like something physical. Don't contact your chief. Dana had just told him without saying it directly that she could not guarantee his department was clean. That the web of association and access and carefully maintain relationships that Harper had built over years might extend even into the 17-person Silver Creek Police Department. He thought about his chief, a man he'd worked alongside for 7 years, a man he'd trusted without question. And he realized that trust without examination was exactly the kind of thing that a careful, patient criminal enterprise counted on. Understood, he said. The next 40 minutes were the hardest. There was nothing to do but wait, and waiting was the thing that Claire was worst at. Ethan could see it the way she sat at the table with her hands flat and still, but her jaw tight, the way her eyes moved to the communications equipment, every few minutes, the way she was managing the stillness, the same way she managed everything by sheer discipline, applied directly against her own instincts. Victor had brought food, real food, eggs and toast made in the compound kitchen by someone who clearly did this every morning and did it well. He set it in front of both of them without asking whether they wanted it. Claire looked at the plate. Eat, Victor said. You can't think straight on an empty stomach and blood loss. She ate, methodically, efficiently, like she was fueling something. But she ate. Doc looked at the rib, Victor said, settling into the chair across from her with his own plate. He says you're right cracked, not broken through. He says you should not be sitting upright having this conversation. He's not wrong, Claire said. But here you are, Victor said. Here I am, she agreed. Victor looked at her for a moment. There was something in the look that was not quite paternal and not quite military, but somewhere in the particular territory between the two. The look of an older person recognizing something in a younger one that they have seen before in people who survive things they shouldn't have. What do you do after this, he said. Claire stopped chewing for a moment. I don't know, she said. She said it without deflection, straightforwardly, in a way that told Ethan this was genuinely an open question rather than one she was avoiding. I haven't thought that far. You should, Victor said. People who spend a long time surviving forget to think about what comes after surviving. He stood and picked up his plate. Think about it. He walked away and Claire watched him go, and Ethan thought she might say something, but she didn't. She just looked at the empty doorway for a moment, and then she looked back at the device on the table, and she was quiet in the particular way that meant something had landed and was being turned over privately. At 7:43, the phone rang. Claire picked up before the second ring was done. We have the warrants, Dana said. Her voice was tight and controlled and very fast. We're executing in 40 minutes, simultaneous the hospital, the administrator offices, the county building, and 2 residential addresses. A pause. Claire, I need you to stay at your current location until I tell you it's clear. Do not go to the hospital. Do not go to your apartment. Do not make any contact with anyone in Silver Creek institutional structures. Understood, Claire said. Walker, Dana said. Here, Ethan said. Same applies to you. Stay off department comms. I have a contact in the sheriff's office who is clean. She's been briefed and she's going to be part of the coordination. Your chief is going to be brought in after the fact, not before. The confirmation of what that meant hit him differently when Dana said it directly. His chief, a man named Roger Castillo, 51 years old, 17 years with the department, 2 kids in college, and a wife who taught elementary school, in a face Ethan had looked at across briefing tables more times than he could count, compromised. How deep, Ethan said. Enough, Dana said. We'll know more after. Right now, you need to sit tight. A brief pause. And Walker, you did the right thing. Both of you. The call ended. The room was quiet. And then Claire did something Ethan had not expected. She laughed. Not a long laugh, not even a happy one exactly. It was brief and sharp, and it seemed to come out of her involuntarily. The laugh of someone who has been under such sustained pressure for such a long time that the first signal of release produces something that is not quite relief and not quite joy, but is the body's way of acknowledging that the weight has shifted. Victor appeared in the doorway at the sound of it. She looked at him. 40 minutes, she said. He nodded slowly. I'll make more coffee, he said. Young. Those 40 minutes passed differently than the 40 before them. The waiting was still hard, but it had a shape to it now. A defined end, a direction, a sense that the machinery that should have been in motion from the beginning was finally belatedly turning. Ethan sat at the table and drank his coffee and thought about 11 weeks. He thought about a woman going to work every day in a hospital where someone wanted her dead, collecting evidence with the careful patience of someone who understood that the only way to survive this was to make herself too valuable alive, to kill too valuable because what she was building was more dangerous to Harper than she was. Until she got too close. Until the evidence crossed whatever threshold made the risk of letting her finish greater than the risk of stopping her. He thought about the night before, the ambulance in the dark, her voice. Are you sure you came alone? He looked across the table at her. She was sitting with her hands around her mug, looking at the wall in the particular stillness of someone who has finally, after a very long time, allowed themselves to stop moving. Not because they feel safe, but because the thing they have been moving toward is close enough now that they can afford to stop for the length of one cup of coffee. Can I ask you something, he said. She looked at him. Yes. When you were in the military, he said, the hardest thing you did, not operationally, I mean personally, the hardest thing to carry. She was quiet for a moment. Leaving, she said finally, coming home, trying to figure out how to be a person in a world where most people's hardest day was a flat tire or a bad performance review. A pause. I wasn't angry about it, I understood it, but for a long time I felt, she searched for the word, transparent. Like I was there, but nobody could see the specific person standing in front of them. They saw a nurse or a veteran or a woman or whatever category fit the moment. Not, she stopped. Not Claire, Ethan said. She looked at him. Not Claire, she agreed. The honesty of it sat between them simply and without any weight attached to it. Not an invitation, not a moment, just two people who had been through an unusual amount together in a short amount of time, being straight with each other. Then Victor came back with the coffee, and the moment passed and became just a conversation again. At 8:26, the radio in the communications room crackled with a frequency Ethan didn't recognize. Victor was on his feet before any of them moving through the door into the communications space. Ethan followed. Claire was right behind him. The voice on the frequency was professional and terse. All teams, this is federal. Execute, execute, execute. Confirm receipt. A cascade of confirmations followed call signs. Unit numbers, the dry, efficient language of a coordinated operation moving simultaneously across multiple locations. Victor looked at Ethan. That's it. That's it, Ethan said. And from the communications room, none of them could see any of it happening. Not the federal vehicles pulling into the hospital parking lot. Not the agents walking through the glass front doors of Silver Creek Regional with credentials and warrants. Not the moment when Dr. Vincent Harper looked up from his desk and understood from the specific expression on the face of the agent standing in his doorway that his very carefully constructed world had just ended. They couldn't see any of it. But they felt it in the way that people feel when a thing that has been wrong for a long time is finally being made right. Not with fanfare, not with ceremony, with the quiet, absolute inevitability of a door closing. Victor exhaled slowly through his nose. Good, he said. Just that one word. Then his phone buzzed on the table, a message from a number Ethan didn't recognize. Victor looked at it, his expression shifted by 1 degree. What is it? Ethan said. One of mine, Victor said. He was watching the hospital from a distance. He paused. Harper didn't go quietly. Ethan felt the hair on his arm stand up. What happened? Victor looked up. His eyes went to Claire. He made a phone call before they got to him, Victor said. And then someone left the hospital through the service entrance in the 3 minutes between when the perimeter was set and when the teams moved in. He paused. My man says the person who left was carrying something. Claire's face went very still. A hard drive, she said, not a question. A realization spoken out loud. Looks like it, Victor said. There's a backup, she said. I didn't know there was a backup. He kept a copy somewhere else in the building. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. If someone got out with a copy of the original records before the agents secured the servers, they have the ability to access the shell company accounts and move the money before the warrants freeze the assets. Ethan was already reaching for Victor's table phone. I need to reach Dana. Already on it, Victor said. He was talking into his own phone in a low, rapid voice, and the person on the other end was already responding. Claire stood in the middle of the room with her arms at her sides and her cracked rib and her 12 hours of accumulated damage. And she was thinking he could see it the way her eyes went slightly unfocused when she was processing fast running through the hospital. Layout, the staff, the administrative structure, whatever she knew about who would have been positioned to get out with that drive in a 3-minute window. Who had building-wide access at that hour, Ethan said to her. Administration, security, maintenance. Oh, she stopped. Her face changed. Security was, she said, the security supervisor, the one Rosa didn't trust, the one who should have been the first person to respond when my locker was broken into and wasn't. She looked at Ethan directly. His name is Brandon Merritt. He's been at Regional for 3 years. He arrived the same quarter the supply discrepancies started. Ethan put that into the phone. He related to Dana's emergency line in 6 sentences. The response came back in under 30 seconds. We have him, Dana said. Her voice was strained. He's in the parking structure. We have units moving now. The drive. If he has it on him, we'll get it, Dana said. Hold the line. The next 2 minutes were the longest Ethan had experienced since the night before standing at the edge of the field, looking at the ambulance in the dark. He stood in Victor's communications room with the phone against his ear and watched Claire stand perfectly still in the center of the room. And he thought about all the things that 11 weeks of work could come down to, how easily a 2-minute window could undo months of careful construction, how close every important thing always was to falling apart at the last possible moment. Then Dana's voice came back. We have him, she said. Drive secured. The breath that came out of Claire was not loud. It was barely audible. But it was the first completely unguarded breath Ethan had heard from her since the moment he'd put his flashlight on her against the bridge embankment. Okay, she said, to no one in particular. Just okay. Victor, who had been listening, uncrossed his arms. Now he said to Claire in the same matter-of-fact tone he used for everything, you can sit down. She sat down. And for a moment, just long enough for the specific person who had been standing behind 11 weeks of mission and discipline and survival to surface and be briefly privately visible. Her hands flat on the table in front of her were not entirely steady. She noticed it. She put one hand over the other. She sat with it. And Ethan looked away because it was the right thing to do, and because some moments of honesty belong entirely to the person experiencing them. Victor refilled the coffee. The radio in the corner continued its professional narration of a federal operation concluding successfully, one confirmed location at a time. And somewhere across town in the building where Claire Bennett had gone to work every day for 2 years in the corridors, where Rosa Delgado had kept quiet watch and said nothing to the wrong people in the offices where a man named Harper had built a careful empire of theft disguised as healing federal agents, were walking room to room with warrants and evidence bags, dismantling the thing that had nearly gotten a nurse killed on a bridge in the dark. It was not over yet. There were still names to confirm, accounts to freeze testimony, to gather cases to build. But the first and most critical thing, the evidence, the device, the documentation that one woman had built alone over 11 weeks, while someone tried to figure out how to make her disappear, that was safe. It was in federal hands. And the man who had sent a vehicle without lights down a dark road to push her off a bridge was sitting in a hospital office, explaining himself to people who had the receipts for every single thing he had done. Claire Bennett, sitting at a table in a motorcycle club compound with a cracked rib and coffee going cold in front of her, had done that. Not with a weapon, not with authority, not with any of the institutional power that Harper had spent years accumulating. With patience and precision and the unshakable conviction that the truth, if you built it carefully enough, could not be buried. Victor sat across from her. Told you, he said. She looked at him. You said you didn't know what came after surviving, he said. But look at what you just did. He held her gaze. You already know. You just haven't given yourself permission to see it yet. She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, the day was fully light. Silver Creek, Arizona was awake and moving and going about its ordinary business, unaware that the ground underneath the most trusted building in town had just shifted permanently. And Claire Bennett sat with her cold coffee and her steady hands and the particular hard-won quiet of someone who has carried a thing to its end. The federal operation took 4 hours and 11 minutes from first contact to last confirmed arrest. Ethan knew this because Dana Reyes called him with the final count at 12:32 in the afternoon, and the first warrant had been executed at 8:26 that morning. He had been in Victor's compound the entire time, watching the radio updates filter through in pieces. A location security here, a person detained in there, a server seized, an account frozen. The architecture of a criminal enterprise being disassembled, one room at a time. He sat across from Claire through all of it. She listened to each update with the same expression. Not satisfaction, not relief, not the kind of visible vindication that people expected from someone who had been through what she had been through. Just attention, the focused, steady attention of someone who needed to hear each piece confirmed before they allowed themselves to believe the whole. When Dana called with the final count, Ethan put the phone on the table between them so Claire could hear. 4 arrests at the hospital, Dana said. Harper, 2 senior administrators, and the CFO. The security supervisor, Merritt, is in custody. He's already talking, which is going to make the case significantly stronger. The county official, a brief pause, was taken into custody at his office at 09:17. He did not resist. Another pause. We've frozen 14 financial accounts across 6 shell entities. The total asset value we're looking at is somewhere north of $3.2 million. Claire closed her eyes, just for a second. Then they were open again. The 2 other administrators, she said. Are their families? No family involvement confirmed, Dana said. This appears to have been contained to the professional network Harper built over the past 3 years. A pause. Claire, I need you to come in. Not for interrogation. You're a witness and a source, not a subject. But we need your formal statement, and we need you on record while everything is fresh. I know, Claire said. I'm also going to need Officer Walker's statement regarding the events of last night and this morning. Ethan said, I'll be there. One more thing, Dana said. Her voice shifted, not softer exactly, but more personal, the voice of someone stepping out of the professional register for a moment. Claire, the secondary records you found, the deleted partition. There are 4 patient cases in the documented supply diversion that we're already flagging as potentially harmed by medication substitution. 4 cases we can document. There are likely more. A pause. You may have saved lives that you'll never know about. I need you to understand that. The line was quiet for a moment. I understand, Claire said. Her voice was even. But Ethan watched her hands on the table, and he saw the way the tendons in them shifted just briefly before she made them still again. Phoenix Field office, Dana said. I'll send the address to Walker's number. 2 hours. She ended the call. The room was quiet. Then Victor, who had been standing in the doorway the entire time because Victor Hayes apparently processed important events on his feet, said $3.2 million. Yes, Ethan said. Out of a hospital, Victor said. He said it in a tone that was not quite disbelief and not quite disgust, but something in the precise territory between them. Out of a place people go when they are most afraid. He was quiet for a moment. My man Danny came out of that hospital 6 months ago with a prescription error that we spent 2 months untangling. His wife thought he was losing his mind before they figured out the medication was wrong. He looked at Claire. That's in your file? If it was in the patient records I documented, yes, she said. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back into the room and sat down at the table, and he said something that Ethan had never heard Victor Hayes say in 6 years of knowing him. Thank you, he said to Claire. Simple, direct, without any of the armor that usually covered everything he said. Claire looked at him. I was just doing my job, she said. No, Victor said. You were doing more than your job. Your job was to take blood pressure and change IV line. What you did was something else. He held her gaze. Call it what it is. She was quiet for a moment. Then very quietly, I couldn't let it keep going. No, Victor said. You couldn't. That's exactly what I mean. The drive to the Phoenix Field office took 2 hours. Ethan drove. Claire sat in the passenger seat, the same seat she'd occupied the night before, bleeding carefully into a gauze pad and telling him someone had tried to kill her. The same truck, the same road, the same 2 people. But the quality of the silence between them was entirely different from the silence of those first minutes on the dark road to his house. That silence had been the silence of strangers in a dangerous situation. each measuring the other and finding an uneasy, necessary trust. This silence was something else. It was the silence of people who had been through something together and arrived on the other side, and who were now figuring out who they were to each other in a world that was no longer moving fast enough to make the question irrelevant. About 40 minutes into the drive, Claire said, "You're chief." Ethan had been waiting for this. "Yeah. How are you doing with that?" He thought about it honestly, the way he'd been trying not to think about it since Dana had first implied it and then confirmed it. Roger Castillo, a man he'd trusted with the easy, unexamined confidence of someone who had never had a reason to look closer. "I don't know yet," he said. "Ask me in a week." He may not have known the full scope of what he was involved in, Claire said. She said it carefully, not as a defense of Castillo, but as a fact she was offering. People in these networks often operate on a need-to-know basis. Harper would have given him just enough to compromise him and no more. It keeps the liability distributed. "That doesn't make it better," Ethan said. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." Another few minutes of silence. Then Ethan said, "Dana said there are likely more than 4 patients who were affected." "Yes." "How many more?" Claire looked at the road ahead. "Based on the pattern of the supply diversion, the frequency, the quantities, the duration, I estimated between 15 and 30 over the 18 months. People who received diluted medications, people who didn't respond to treatment the way they should have, and whose care teams didn't understand why." She paused. "Some of them probably recovered anyway. The human body is more resilient than the margin of error those people were operating on. But some of them," she stopped. "Some of them didn't," Ethan said. "Some of them didn't," she said. The truck was quiet. "That's why you didn't stop," he said. It wasn't a question, he was understanding it as he said it, putting together the pieces of who she was and what she had done and why she had kept doing it for 11 weeks while someone tried to figure out how to make her disappear. Not just the corruption, not just the fraud. People were getting hurt. People were dying, she said, flat and precise. And because the death looked like medical failure instead of what it actually was, nobody connected it. There were no alarms, no investigations. It just went into the category of things that happen in hospitals and can't always be explained. She turned to look at him directly. "I couldn't let that be the category." He understood then completely and without any remaining gap why she had stayed. Why she had gone to work every day in a building where someone wanted her gone. Why she had built the case slowly and carefully instead of running. Because running would have preserved herself and abandoned everyone in that hospital who didn't know what was happening to them. She hadn't been brave in the abstract. She had been brave in the specific, particular way that costs the most. The way that requires you to knowingly remain in danger so that other people don't have to face a danger they don't even know exists. He didn't say any of that. There was no version of saying it that wouldn't have been too much, so he just drove. The Phoenix field office was exactly what a federal field office always was. Functional fluorescent, the particular institutional beige of a space designed for work rather than impression. Dana Reyes met them in the lobby, and she was exactly what Ethan expected from her voice on the phone, mid-40s sharp-eyed with the compact physical economy of someone who had been trained and stayed trained. She looked at Claire, and something passed between them that was clearly older than this morning. The recognition of 2 people who had served in the same kind of places and carried the same kind of knowledge out of them. They shook hands. Then, briefly, unexpectedly, Dana pulled Claire into a one-armed embrace that lasted exactly 2 seconds before both of them stepped back and resumed the professional distance. "You look terrible," Dana said to Claire. "I'm aware," Claire said. "We have a doctor on staff who's going to look at you before I put you in a room and take your statement." "The rib." "I don't care what you already know about the rib," Dana said in a tone that did not invite discussion. "Doctor first, then statement." Claire opened her mouth. Then she looked at Dana's face and closed it again. "Fine," she said. Dana turned to Ethan. "Officer Walker, I've already coordinated with the sheriff's office regarding your department. Your chief has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation into his involvement with the network. He is cooperating." She paused. "I want to be clear, the investigation into your department is a formality at this point. There is no indication that anyone other than Castillo had knowledge of the operation. Your record is clean, and your conduct last night was exemplary." Ethan absorbed that. He wasn't sure how to feel about the word exemplary attached to a night that had felt like improvisation from start to finish. Exemplary, he said. You found a wounded woman in the dark and made every correct call under conditions that most officers would have fumbled, Dana said. Yes, exemplary. She said it briskly without ceremony and then moved on because Dana Reyes was clearly someone who stated facts and didn't linger on them. We're going to need your full statement as well. Conference room B, can you start in about an hour? Yes, he said. Dana nodded and walked Claire toward the medical suite, and Ethan stood in the lobby of the Phoenix field office and looked around at the institutional beige walls and the fluorescent lights and the ordinary machinery of federal law enforcement doing its ordinary work. And he thought about the night before with the kind of complete disorientation that only comes when you have lived through something that does not yet feel entirely real. He sat down in one of the lobby chairs. He put his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands, and he sat there for a moment, not dramatically, not falling apart, just letting himself be still for the first time in approximately 11 hours. A woman in the lobby who was clearly waiting for someone looked over at him. He looked up. I'm fine, he said. You sure, she said. Not remotely, he said, but I will be. She nodded and looked away, and he sat back in the chair and looked at the ceiling and let out a very long, very slow breath. The statement took 3 hours. This was not unusual for a situation of this complexity. Ethan had given statements before in far simpler cases, and he understood the process. But the specificity required here was different. The federal investigators needed every detail in precise sequence, confirmed and cross-referenced and documented. Every decision he had made from the moment he heard the dispatch call, every word Claire had said, every action taken or not taken, and the reason behind each one. He told it straight. He did not editorialize. He did not make himself sound more certain than he had been at any given moment, because uncertainty accurately documented was more useful than confidence retrofitted to a situation. When they asked him why he had not called it in through official department channels after Claire warned him about the communications vulnerability, he said, because she had identified a specific mechanism by which information could be accessed by people connected to the people trying to kill her. And because I made a judgment call that the risk of using compromised channels outweighed the procedural requirement to do so. The investigator across from him, a careful young man named Aguilar, who wrote everything down by hand, in addition to the recording, looked up at that. And if that judgment call had been wrong, Aguilar said, Ethan looked at him. If I'd called it in and someone had monitored the communication and been able to locate her before she could transmit the evidence, the entire case would have died with her. He paused. I'd rather be wrong in the way that produces a living witness and $3.2 million in frozen criminal assets than right in a way that produces a body. Aguilar wrote that down. He wrote it down very carefully. It was 4:30 in the afternoon when Ethan and Claire were both finally released from the field office with instructions to remain available for follow-up contact, not to discuss the details of their statements publicly, and to expect the case to move through the federal court system over the coming months. They stood outside the building in the afternoon light. Claire had a new bandage on her side properly, applied properly, padded by someone who had done it with better equipment than Ethan's field kit. She stood straight, which he now understood she would do regardless of what it cost her, but there was a quality to the straightness that was slightly different from the rigid combat posture of the morning. Slightly less armored. Slightly more like a person standing normally rather than a person maintaining a position. You're staying in Phoenix tonight, he said. It wasn't a question. Dana had already arranged at a hotel close to the field office in case they needed to be recalled quickly. Yes, she said. How's the rib? The doctor confirmed what I already knew. A pause. He also said I have a mild concussion that I apparently failed to account for. You got hit in the head and you didn't mention it. I had other priorities. He looked at her. She looked back at him with an expression that was the closest thing to sheepish he had seen on her face, which was to say, it was barely perceptible, but unmistakably there. You had a concussion, he said, a mild one. While doing a tactical threat assessment in the dark, treating your own wound, calling a federal agent, coordinating evidence retrieval, and identifying the likely exit route of a compromised security supervisor. Yes, she said. He laughed. He hadn't expected to laugh. It came out of him the same way her brief, sharp laugh had come out of her in Victor's communications room. the involuntary release of something that had been under pressure for too long. She looked at him when he laughed, and then she smiled. Not the controlled, partial expression he'd seen glimpses of through the day. A real one, brief and uncomplicated, the smile of a person who has made it to the other side of something very hard and is only just beginning to understand that they made it. It lasted about 3 seconds. Then it was gone, but it had been there. "Thank you," she said. The same words she'd said to him in his kitchen, but heavier now that both of them knew the full weight of everything those 2 words were sitting on top of. "For last night, for this morning, for all of it." He looked at her steadily. "You did the work," he said. "I just drove." "You made it possible for the work to matter," she said. "That's not nothing." I didn't argue with her because she was right, and also because he had learned in the past 14 hours that arguing with Claire Bennett about things she had already determined to be factually accurate was an exercise in futility. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "After, when this is through." She thought about it. It was the same question Victor had asked her, and she gave it the same honest consideration, not deflecting, not supplying an automatic answer. "There are people who went through that hospital and don't know why their treatment went wrong," she said finally. "Families who don't have answers. Patients who were told their bodies failed them when actually the system failed them." She looked at the sidewalk briefly and then back up at him. "Someone needs to help connect those people to what we found, so they can understand, so they can—" She stopped. "So they can stop blaming themselves." I thought about 4 confirmed cases. 15 to 30 likely, all of them walking around somewhere in Silver Creek, carrying the weight of an unexplained medical failure, not knowing that the failure had a name and a face and was currently in federal custody. "That's a job," he said. "Yes," she said. "That's a real job. That's months of work." "Probably longer," she agreed. "You'd stay in Silver Creek." She looked at him. There was something in the look that was careful but not closed, the look of someone considering a question that has more than one layer. "I don't know yet," she said. "Ask me in a week." It was exactly what he'd said to her 2 hours earlier about Castillo. He recognized it. She knew he recognized it. Neither of them acknowledged it directly, which felt right. "Okay," he said. He looked at the street. She looked at the street. A week in which the federal case would begin its formal processing, in which his department would deal with the fallout of a compromised chief, in which a hospital full of people would have to reckon with what had been happening inside the institution they worked in which 4 confirmed patients and potentially 30 more would be contacted by investigators and told a truth that would feel for many of them like the ground opening up. A week in which Claire Bennett, who had rebuilt herself twice already, would be deciding whether she was going to rebuild again and where. The drive back to Silver Creek was quieter than the drive down. Not uncomfortably quiet. The comfortable quiet of people who have been through enough together that silence doesn't need to be filled. The sky was going orange at the edges by the time they crossed back into Silver Creek's county limits, and the familiar road stretched ahead of them and looked completely different from the way it had looked at 3 in the morning. Everything looked different. That was always the thing nobody warned you about, how thoroughly a single night of truth-telling rearranged the landscape of a familiar place. Same roads, same buildings, same sky. But when you knew what had been happening inside one of those buildings, and you knew that it had stopped, the whole geography of the town sat differently in your chest. He drove past the hospital. I didn't mean to. It was on the direct route, but he found himself slowing slightly as they passed the parking lot, where he could see 2 federal vehicles still positioned near the entrance and a cluster of hospital staff standing outside in the way that people stand when their normal routine has been completely disrupted and nobody has told them what comes next. Claire looked at the building as they passed it. He watched her face. She looked at it the way someone looks at a place that held them for a long time, in ways that were both good and terrible, with the particular complicated expression that cannot be reduced to either love or anger, but contains elements of both and something else entirely that has no easy name. Then they were past it, and the hospital was behind them, and the road ahead was just road. "Rosa," Claire said, "I need to make sure Rosa is okay. If they interviewed the hospital staff—" "Dana said witness protection for key civilian sources is standard," Ethan said. "I'll check. And make sure her job is protected. If the hospital administration is Claire," she stopped. "I'll check on Rosa," he said. "She's okay, I promise." She was quiet for a moment. You can't promise that, she said. But she said it without real force. No, he agreed. But I will check, and I will make sure that whoever ends up overseeing the hospital's administrative restructuring knows exactly what Rosa Delgado did this morning and what it cost her to do it. Another moment of quiet. She called me Miss Claire, Claire said quietly, like she was talking to herself almost more than to him. Every day for 2 years, never just Claire, always Miss Claire. She paused. I never told her what I was doing. I never told her what was at stake. And she helped me anyway because she had watched long enough to know that something was wrong, and she had been waiting for someone to do something about it. You did something about it, Ethan said. We all did, she said, in whatever way we could. I thought about that. Rosa, with a key in her coat pocket, walking out of a shift she'd worked 14 years without explaining herself to anyone. Victor Hayes lending his communication infrastructure and his compound and his quiet authority to a situation that had nothing operationally to do with him, because 2 of his people had been hurt, and because a woman with a cracked rib had been honest with him across a table, and he'd respected the honesty. Dana Reyes 2 hours away picking up a call at 6:47 in the morning from someone she hadn't spoken to in 2 years and saying, okay, go ahead, I'm listening without a single moment of hesitation. And Claire, 11 weeks alone building something that could not be built quickly or carelessly or with anyone else's help because the cost of being wrong was not abstract. The cost of being wrong was people. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Yes. Last night at the bridge, when you first saw me, she paused. What did you actually think in that first second before you said anything? I thought about it honestly. The flashlight beam landing on her in the brush. The wound, the weapon, the posture, the eyes that were doing a threat assessment when they should have been glazed with shock. I thought, he said, that I had no idea what I was walking into, and that whatever it was not going to be simple. He glanced at her. And then you asked if I came alone, and I thought this is the most unusual person I have ever found at an accident scene. She made a small sound that was not quite a laugh, but was in the same territory. That's fair, she said. What did you think, he said. When you saw my flashlight, she considered. I thought either this is someone sent to finish or this is someone who has no idea what he just walked into. A pause. And then I watched you move, and I decided it was the second one. Lucky for me, he said. Lucky for both of us, she said. He pulled up in front of the hotel Dana had arranged, a plain, clean place 3 blocks from the center of town, and put the truck in park. She reached for the door, then she stopped. Ethan, she said. Yeah. She turned to look at him. The late afternoon light came through the windshield at a low angle and caught the edge of her face, and for a moment she looked like exactly what she was. A 32-year-old woman who had survived things most people would not have survived, and who was very tired, and who was also underneath all of it, quietly and unmistakably relieved. What you did last night, she said, coming out to that road alone, bringing me to your house, trusting me when you had no concrete reason to. She held his gaze. That was not nothing either. He looked at her. No, he said. I guess it wasn't. She opened the door and got out. He watched her walk into the hotel straight-backed, measured the cracked rib invisible in the way she moved, because she had decided it would be invisible, and she meant it. He sat in the truck for a moment after she disappeared inside. Then his radio crackled. Not department dispatch. It was Dana's number on his cell phone sitting in the cup holder. He picked up. Walker, Dana said. I have a preliminary briefing scheduled for tomorrow at 9. I need you there. Also, a brief pause that had something in it he couldn't immediately identify. I need to tell you something before you hear it through other channels. He felt the familiar tightening. What? Harper's attorney made contact with the DA's office 40 minutes ago, Dana said. Harper is indicating willingness to cooperate, full cooperation. In exchange for a reduced charge structure, he's prepared to provide information about the operation that goes beyond what we currently have documented. Another pause. Walker, the operation in Silver Creek was not standalone. It was part of a larger network. At least 4 other hospitals in 3 states. Same structure, same shell companies, same supply chain model. The truck was very quiet. How many patients? Ethan said. Dana's pause was 1 second long. We don't know yet, she said. That's what the cooperation is going to help us establish. Her voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it. Not distress, but the weight of a number that was probably large. What Claire built in Silver Creek, the documentation, the traced authorization chain, the shell company structure, it's the skeleton key for the whole network. Because she was so thorough, we can now apply the same pattern recognition framework to the other facilities and identify the same discrepancies. Ethan sat with that for a moment. Does she know? He said. Not yet, Dana said. I thought you should know first she paused. Given how this started, I thought you'd want to be the one to tell her. He looked at the hotel entrance. Yeah, he said quietly. Okay. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, Dana said, and she ended the call. He sat in the truck in the long slanted light of late afternoon with the weight of what Dana had just told him sitting in the center of his chest. 4 other hospitals, 3 other states. The same operation replicated in other small towns where the most trusted person in the building was the most dangerous one. And the thing that had cracked it, the thread that had unraveled the whole network, was 11 weeks of work by one person who had been told by her supervisor that the discrepancies were being reviewed and had decided quietly and absolutely that she did not believe it. He got out of the truck. He walked into the hotel. He found her in the small lobby, talking to the front desk about a room key that wasn't working, and she looked up when she heard him come through the door, and her expression shifted slightly. The quick automatic read of his face that she apparently did with everyone always, and she saw something there that made her go still. What happened? She said. He crossed the lobby toward her. Come sit down, he said. I need to tell you something. She looked at him for one long moment. Then she moved to the small seating area by the window, and she sat, and he sat across from her, and he told her. He watched her face as he spoke. He watched the moment the scale of it landed on her, the 4 other hospitals, the 3 other states, the network that had been running in the dark in other small towns with other supply chains and other shell companies and other patients who didn't know why they hadn't responded to treatment the way they should have. He watched her absorb it. She sat with her hands on her knees and her back straight and her face very still, and she was quiet for a long time after he finished. Then she said, how many hospitals total? At least 4 others, he said, probably more as the investigation develops. She nodded slowly. Processing. The framework I built, she said, the pattern recognition model for the supply discrepancies. Dana said they can apply it to the other facilities. That's what she said. I can help with that, she said immediately. Of course she could. Of course that was the first thing she said. He looked at her, this woman who had walked into a war she didn't ask for and spent 11 weeks building the weapon that would end it, and who was now 36 hours after someone tried to kill her, already thinking about how to use what she'd built to reach further. Claire, he said. She looked at him. You're allowed to take a breath first, he said gently. You're allowed to sit here tonight and just be a person who survives something. The rest of it will still be there tomorrow. She looked at him. Something moved through her expression that was complex and slow and completely human. The expression of someone being given explicit permission to stop for the first time in a very long time by someone they had no reason to distrust. I don't know how to do that very well, she said. Honest, without any of the defensive composure she usually wrapped around honesty. I know, he said. I haven't been very good at it since. I know, he said again. She was quiet. Outside the window, Silver Creek went on with its evening ordinary and unhurried, entirely unaware of the size of the thing that had shifted inside it today. People going home from work, stopping at the gas station, picking up kids from school. A town that looked the same as it always had and would never quite be the same. Okay, Claire said finally, very quietly. Okay. She leaned back in the chair, just slightly, just enough to signal that the rigid forward posture had for this moment been set aside. She looked out the window. He sat with her. Neither of them said anything for a while, and that was exactly right. She did not take a breath for very long. Ethan had known she wouldn't. He had said it anyway. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to be a person tonight, because it needed to be said, even if both of them understood that the woman sitting across from him was not built for stopping. Not yet, maybe not ever, in the way most people stop, the way that involved truly setting something down and walking away from it. But she tried. That night in the hotel, she tried. He knew because she called him at 7 the next morning. Not with a strategy, not with a next step, not with a question about the federal briefing, but just to say that she had slept 5 hours and the rib felt marginally better, and she had ordered room service for the first time in years, and it was mediocre and she had eaten all of it. He laughed. She said, "Don't make it into something." "I'm not," he said, still laughing. "I can hear you making it into something." "I'm just glad you ate," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then quietly, "Me too." The 9 o'clock briefing at the Phoenix field office changed everything again. Dana had assembled a room, 6 federal agents, 2 DEA representatives, and a prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office named Kathleen Marsh, who had the particular focused energy of someone who had been waiting for a case like this for a long time and was not going to waste a single minute of it. Dana introduced Claire and Ethan without ceremony with the specific economy of someone who respected the room's time, and then she put the framework on the table. 4 other hospitals, 3 states, a network that had been running for 4 years before Claire Bennett had looked at a supply log in Silver Creek, Arizona, and decided that the discrepancy was not a clerical error. Kathleen Marsh had a copy of Claire's documentation in front of her. She had clearly been reading it since early morning. The pages had the particular creasedness of paper that had been handled intensively. She looked up at Claire across the conference table and said without preamble, "Walk me through how you found the deleted partition." Claire walked her through it, precisely methodically in the language of someone who had been both a soldier and a nurse and knew how to brief people in a way that moved fast without losing accuracy. She explained the server access anomalous timestamp pattern she had noticed in the backup logs, the specific sequence of forensic steps she had taken to recover data that had been marked for deletion but not yet overwritten. Marsh listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, Marsh looked at Dana. "She's going to be essential to the multi-state investigation," Marsh said, directly as if Claire was not in the room. "I'm in the room," Claire said. Marsh looked at her, a half-second of reassessment, then something that was almost a smile. "Yes," Marsh said, "you are, which is why I'm saying it out loud so you understand that what you built here is going to be the backbone of a federal prosecution that extends well beyond Silver Creek. We want you formally involved. Consultant capacity, protected witness status, and full federal coordination for however long the investigation runs." The room was very still for a moment. Ethan watched Claire's face. She was processing it, not overwhelmed, just thorough. The way she processed everything, running the variables, measuring the count, accounting for what it meant to say yes and what it meant to say no, and what the difference was to the people who were waiting at the end of whichever answer she gave. "The other facilities," she said. "The pattern I identified, the supply chain discrepancy model, the shell company authorization structure. How quickly can your teams apply it to the other hospitals?" "With your guidance, weeks, not months," Marsh said. "There are patients," Claire said. Her voice was even, but underneath the evenness was something that Ethan had learned over the past 36 hours to hear accurately. It was not coldness. It was the opposite. It was the controlled compression of something that felt very large. In those 4 facilities, people who got wrong medication, people who didn't recover the way they should have, people who were told their bodies failed them. "Yes," Marsh said. "Finding them and getting them answers is part of this," Claire said. "It was not a negotiation, it was a condition." "It's already in the mandate," Marsh said. "Patient notification and support services are a priority." Claire was quiet for one more moment. "Okay," she said. "I'm in." The trial preparation took 8 months. In those 8 months, the federal investigation expanded to confirm 6 additional hospital facilities across 4 states, 2 more than the initial estimate. The shell company network. Once the authorization framework Claire had built was applied systematically, unraveled, with the particular inevitability of something that had been designed to look legitimate right up until the moment someone who understood the anatomy of the deception took it apart layer by layer. 31 confirmed patients were identified as having received compromised medication across all 7 facilities. 11 families were notified that deaths which had been attributed to medical failure were now part of a federal criminal investigation into deliberate supply fraud. Those notifications were among the hardest things anyone in the investigation did. The federal victim advocate assigned to the case told Dana privately that she had done this work for 12 years, and this was the first time she had cried in a victim notification meeting. She cried in 3 of them. Claire was present for 2 of those 3. She had asked to be. Donna had initially said it wasn't protocol. Claire had said with the particular quiet force she brought to everything she decided that she understood protocol, and she was asking anyway. because the people in those rooms had spent months or years believing that medicine had failed their family members, and she wanted them to hear from someone who had been inside the building, who had seen the records and understood the mechanism, that it was not medicine that had failed them, that their person had been failed by a person. A specific, identifiable person who was now going to stand in front of a federal court and account for it. Dana had allowed it. The families received it in different ways. Anger, grief, relief, the complicated gratitude of people who have finally been given an answer to a question that had been destroying them quietly for years. One woman, a grandmother in Flagstaff, whose husband had died 7 months after a cardiac procedure at a network-affiliated hospital, had held Claire's hands across a table and looked at her and said, I knew something was wrong. I told the doctors, and they were kind, and they told me it wasn't anything that could have been prevented. And I went home and I believed them, because what else do you do? A pause. I'm glad someone didn't believe them. Claire had not said anything to that. She had just held the woman's hands and let the silence be what it needed to be. Ethan was not in those rooms. But she told him about them afterward, and he listened the same way he had listened to everything she said since the night he found her, with the complete attention of someone who understood that what was being said mattered and deserved the full weight of being heard. Harper pleaded guilty in month 5. The 2 senior administrators followed in month 6. The county official, whose name had not been released to the press, pending the broader investigation, pled guilty in month 7 and received a sentence that the Silver Creek Gazette described as significant, which was a word that Ethan thought fell considerably short of adequate, but was apparently the best available from the vocabulary of a small-town newspaper covering a story that was larger than anything it had covered before. Brandon Merritt, the security supervisor, who had tried to walk out with the backup drive, received the harshest individual sentence of anyone in Silver Creek, partly because of the obstruction and partly because the investigation had confirmed that he had been the one who had arranged the vehicle that ran the ambulance off Hargrove Bridge. He had driven the vehicle himself. When Ethan heard this, he was sitting in his truck outside the Silver Creek PD, where he had just attended the first full departmental briefing since the investigation cleared the department of broader involvement. He sat there for a moment after the call and thought about a dark road and a vehicle with no lights and the crushed rear bumper of an ambulance and the woman who had been inside it. Then he got out of the truck and went back to work. Chief Roger Castillo entered into a plea agreement in month 4. His involvement had been what Dana had suggested, partial, carefully managed by Harper, to be exactly sufficient for compromise without being sufficient for operational knowledge. Harper had needed someone in local law enforcement who would not look too closely at certain things. Castillo had accepted a payment structure disguised as a consulting arrangement with one of the shell companies, and had looked the other way when the monitoring of emergency communications had been proposed as part of the county network integration. He had not known about the ambulance. He had not known about the attempt to kill Claire. When this was confirmed, Ethan found it marginally easier to process, not because it absolved Castillo, but because it meant the man he had worked next to for 7 years had not, at the core, been someone who would sanction murder. Just someone who had taken money to be selectively blind, which was its own category of failure, but a categorically different one. Well, he visited Castillo once in the month before sentencing. Castillo had looked older, not dramatically, not the way people in movies aged by crisis. Just slightly more weighted, the way faces look when the thing they have been carrying concealed is finally visible. I'm sorry, Castillo said. I know that doesn't cover it. No, Ethan said, it doesn't. I told myself it was nothing, Castillo said. The monitoring arrangement. I told myself it was just a communication system upgrade, that I wasn't hurting anyone. People were hurt, Ethan said. He said it evenly and without anger, because the anger had moved through him over the months and settled somewhere that was not about Castillo specifically. A lot of people. I know. Castillo looked at his hands. How is she, the nurse? Ethan considered how to answer that accurately. She's working, he said finally. She's okay. A pause. She's more than okay. Castillo nodded. Ethan left. He did not go back. Claire returned to Silver Creek in month 3. Not to the hospital, not yet. She came back because the federal coordination work required her physical presence for certain depositions and evidence reviews, And because there were people in the town she wanted to see, and because though she did not say this directly, Silver Creek was the place where the thing she had carried alone for 11 weeks had finally become something that other people could see and hold and help carry. And there was a kind of gravity to that, which made it hard to simply drive away from. Rosa Delgado was the first person she went to see. Rosa was back at work, the hospital's interim administration appointed by the county, pending a full organizational restructuring, had formally acknowledged her role in the investigation and had, in the kind of gesture that is inadequate but better than nothing, issued a written commendation that now lived in her personnel file. Rosa had shown it to exactly one person, her daughter, who had called her a hero, at which point Rosa had said, "I just got a key from a locker." And her daughter had said, "Mama, you know that's not what it was." And Rosa had gone quiet because she knew her daughter was right. When Claire came to see her, Rosa was on her lunch break in the hospital cafeteria, a fact that Claire only knew because she had called ahead because she was not going to walk back into Silver Creek Regional Hospital without warning and without purpose. She arrived at the cafeteria at 12:15, and Rosa looked up from her food, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then Rosa stood up, and Claire, who did not make gestures without meaning them, crossed the room and embraced her. Rosa was small, and Claire was taller, and the embrace lasted longer than 2 seconds, which was notable because almost nothing in Claire Bennett's emotional register lasted longer than 2 seconds in its visible form. When they pulled apart, Rosa looked at her face and said, "You look better." "I'm told I looked terrible before," Claire said. "You did," Rosa said with the frank honesty that 14 years of watching an institution clearly had given her. "Sit down, I have 20 minutes. They sat, and they talked not about the investigation, not about Harper or the trial or the federal case, but about ordinary things. About Rosa's daughter and the granddaughter who was learning to walk. About the hospital's new interim director, who Rosa had decided was probably a decent person because she had personally come to the housekeeping department and introduced herself and used people's actual names. About the cafeteria's coffee, which Rosa maintained had not improved despite everything. 20 minutes, ordinary and warm and completely unheroic and entirely necessary. When Rosa went back to work, she stopped at the cafeteria door and turned back. "Miss Claire," she said. Claire looked at her. "I knew," Rosa said quietly. "For a long time I knew something was wrong in this building. I just didn't know what to do about it." She paused. "You showed me what to do. For next time." She held Claire's gaze. "There is always a next time, somewhere." She went back to work. Claire sat in the cafeteria alone for a moment and looked at the table. Then she took out her phone and sent Ethan a text that said, "Only she's okay." His reply came back in 30 seconds, "I told you." The turn nobody expected came in month 7. It came not from the federal case that was proceeding on schedule, solid and well documented, and moving toward the kind of outcome that Kathleen Marsh had described in the briefing room as inevitable, but from a direction that none of them had anticipated. A journalist. Her name was Patricia Okafor, and she wrote for a national publication that covered institutional corruption and healthcare fraud, and she had been tracking the Silver Creek case through public court filings since the first arrests. She had been careful and thorough, and she had not published anything without confirmation. And by month 7, she had enough of the public record to write a story that, when it ran, took the thing that had been happening inside the walls of federal courtrooms and put it where the country could see it. The story ran on a Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, it had been read by more people than lived in Silver Creek by a factor of several thousand. By Friday, Claire's name was in the national conversation, not in the breathless celebrity way that Ethan had worried about when Dana first mentioned the possibility of press interest, but in the specific, serious way that matters. The way that attaches a name to a thing that happened so that the thing cannot be made anonymous again. So that when people talked about what had happened at Silver Creek Regional Hospital, they were talking about something that a real person had done, not an abstraction, not a case number, not a system malfunction. A person, Claire Bennett, 32 years old nurse veteran, the woman who had spent 11 weeks building something that was supposed to be impossible to build. The calls came in after that. Speaking requests, interview requests, a legal advocacy organization in Washington that wanted to discuss the creation of a formal whistleblower protection framework specifically for healthcare workers. a veterans organization that had heard about her military background and wanted to recognize her formally. Two separate hospitals in different states that had read the story and reached out to Dana's office, asking how they could implement the kind of internal audit framework Claire had used to detect the discrepancies in Silver Creek. Dana called Claire after the third hospital inquiry. "They want to learn how you did it," Dana said. "They want to build prevention systems based on your methodology." "Send them the framework," Claire said. "It's not proprietary, it's just pattern recognition applied to data that already exists. Anyone can learn it." "They don't want the framework on paper," Dana said. "They want you." Claire was quiet on the line for a moment. "Let me think about it," she said. She thought about it for 3 days, and then she called Ethan. Not to ask him what to do. She never asked anyone what to do, which was both one of her greatest strengths and occasionally a quality that the people who cared about her found quietly maddening. She called him because she had made a decision and she wanted to tell him before she told anyone else. He was on his lunch break sitting in his truck outside a diner when his phone rang. "I'm going to do it," she said without preamble. "The hospital audit work," he said. "Yes, and the advocacy work, and the whistleblower protection framework. There's a real gap there. Healthcare workers who find what I found have almost no formal protection if they don't handle the disclosure exactly right. I handled it right, but I handled it right partly by accident and partly because I had military training that most nurses don't have." She paused. "That gap kills cases. It kills cases and it kills people." "I know," he said. "I'm going to fix it," she said. He smiled at the windshield of his truck. "I know," he said again. "I wanted you to know first," she said. He thought about that for a moment, about what it meant that she had called him first, not Dana, not Marsh, not the veterans organization, or the advocacy group, or any of the institutional players who now wanted a piece of her time and her expertise. Him first. "Thank you for telling me," he said, a brief pause. "I'm also staying in Silver Creek," she said. "For now, there's still work here. The patient support coordination, the organizational restructuring, consultation. It's going to take another year at least. And she stopped. "I'm not ready to leave yet." "Okay," he said. "Is that—" She stopped again. In the year he had known her, he had heard her stop mid-sentence exactly 3 times. Each time it was when she was about to say something that mattered more than she wanted it to. "Is that something you want?" she said. "Me staying." He looked at the diner. He looked at the street. He thought about a dark road and a flashlight and a question asked by a woman who was bleeding and still completely herself. "Yes," he said, simply, without qualification. She was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said, and the way she said it this time was entirely different from all the other times she had said, "Okay," different from the "okay" that meant, "I accept this information," and the "okay" that meant, "I will comply with this plan," and the "okay" that meant the situation is manageable. This "okay" meant something that she was not going to say in more words than that, and both of them knew it, and neither of them pressed it. "I'll see you," she said. "Yeah," he said, "you will." The trial of Vincent Harper began on a Monday in October and lasted 11 days. Claire testified on day 4. She was on the stand for 3 hours and 40 minutes, and she answered every question put to her by Kathleen Marsh with the same steady, precise, unadorned clarity that she brought to everything. She did not perform. She did not editorialize. She stated facts, traced the documentation chain, explained the methodology, and answered the defense's cross-examination with the particular calm of someone who had been questioned in far higher pressure situations by people with more immediate ability to harm them. The defense attorney tried 4 different approaches to create uncertainty about the documentation's integrity. Claire dismantled each one without raising her voice. In the gallery, Rosa Delgado sat in the 2nd row. Victor Hayes sat in the 5th row, flanked by 2 members of his club who had dressed in the civilian equivalent of respectful collared shirts, clean jeans, and absence of visible insignia. Victor watched Claire testify with the expression of a man watching something he had correctly assessed from the beginning and was satisfied to have confirmed. Ethan sat in the 3rd row and watched the jury watch her, and he saw the moment it happened about 40 minutes into her testimony when the jury stopped being an audience and became something else. When they stopped watching the process and started watching the person. When it became impossible to be in the room and not understand it, something beneath the level of legal argument, exactly what she had done, and what it had cost, and why it mattered. Harper was convicted on all counts on day 11. The verdict was read at 10:47 in the morning. Ethan was standing in the corridor outside the courtroom when he heard it, the particular sound that passes through a courthouse when a verdict is announced, a low collective exhale that is not quite sound and not quite silence, but something in between. He went inside. Claire was still at the witness and observer table where she'd been seated with Marsh and Dana. She had her hands flat on the table in front of her, and she was looking at Harper, not with triumph, not with anger, but with the steady, unflinching look of someone who needed to see the moment complete, who needed to watch the gavel come down with their own eyes to make the ending real. The gavel came down. Ethan watched her breathe. Just one breath, one long, controlled, complete breath in and out, the kind of breath that means it's done. He made his way through the row toward her. She looked up when he reached her. "Okay," he said. She thought about it for a genuine moment, the way she thought about everything without shortcuts. "Yes," she said, and then because she was Claire Bennett and she did not do things halfway, more than okay. 6 months after the verdict, she stood in front of 200 healthcare workers at a conference in Phoenix and gave a 45-minute address about institutional corruption, documentation, methodology, and the specific gaps in federal whistleblower protection that the Silver Creek case had exposed. She did not use notes. She spoke the way she did everything directly without performance, with the particular authority of someone who is not speaking from theory, but from the specific lived knowledge of what it costs to stand inside a broken system and refuse to pretend it is whole. At the end, the room was quiet in the way that rooms go quiet when something has landed. Then it was not quiet. Ethan was in the back of the room. He watched the standing ovation move through the crowd the way something physical moves, spreading from the front row, backward, unstoppable. And he stood up too because it would have been wrong to do anything else, and he watched her stand at the podium and receive it. She didn't perform that either. She stood, and she nodded, and she let the acknowledgement be what it was, not for her, but for what she was saying and who she was saying it for. Afterward, in the corridor, a young nurse, late 20s, serious face, the look of someone carrying something they haven't told anyone yet, approached her. "I found something," the young nurse said, quietly, carefully, the way you say a thing when you have been afraid to say it. "At my hospital. I don't know what to do." Claire looked at her, and Ethan, standing 6 feet away, watched Claire's face do the thing that it had started doing in the months since Silver Creek. The thing that was different from the combat medic's assessment and different from the nurse's clinical calm. Something that was purely and specifically hers, a particular quality of complete attention that said, "I see you, I hear you. You are not carrying this alone anymore." "Start with this," Claire said to the young nurse. She reached into her bag and pulled out a card, plain, professional, with a phone number and an email address, in 4 words that Ethan could not read from where he was standing, but which he knew because she had shown him the cards when they were printed. Said, "Document, protect, report, persist." "Call me," Claire said. "Whatever time, whatever day, call me." The young nurse took the card with both hands. That evening, they sat on the porch of the house on the 2-lane road that dead-ended at the tree line. Ethan's house, which had become more familiar to Claire in the past year than her own apartment, with coffee that was actually good this time, and the particular quiet of a day that had been large and was now settling. "She's going to call," Claire said. "I know," Ethan said, "and there'll be another one after her. And another." She paused. "It doesn't stop." "No," he said, "it doesn't." She looked at the dark line of the trees at the edge of the property. He looked at her. "Does that bother you?" he said, "that it keeps going?" She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything. "No," she said finally. "It used to feel like I was trying to hold back something too large. Like whatever I did, the thing was bigger." She paused. "But now it feels different." "How does it feel now?" She was quiet for a moment. "Like it's something that gets done one person at a time," she said. "One hospital at a time, one file at a time, one nurse who sees something wrong and needs to know that seeing it is not enough. She has to build something with it." She turned to look at him. "And I can teach that. I can teach people how to build it." He held her gaze. "Yeah," he said, "you can." The night was clear and quiet around them, and Silver Creek lay somewhere in the darkness beyond the tree line, going about its ordinary evening. Ordinary now, in a way it had not been ordinary a year ago. Ordinary in the way a place becomes ordinary again after a crisis has moved through it and left things rearranged, better rearranged. Not perfect, not finished, not without scars, but honestly solidly better than it had been, and better in ways that were documented and proven and attached to real names, real consequences, real people who had fought for it. He thought about a dark road and a 2:47 a.m. dispatch call and a flashlight beam landing on a woman who was bleeding and refusing to be only that. He thought about 3 words, "Are you sure?" I thought about what it had meant that she asked and what it had meant that he had answered and everything that had unfolded from that single careful question asked in the dark by a person who had learned the hard way that the difference between the right person and the wrong one could determine whether the truth survived. Claire Bennett had determined that. She had determined it 11 weeks before he ever drove down that road by being the kind of person who looked at a discrepancy in a supply log and understood that the discrepancy was not a clerical error. It was a person. It was a decision. It was someone choosing deliberately to take from the people who came to the hospital in their most desperate hours. She had understood that, and she had refused to let it stand. That was the whole story, and it was also bigger than any story. Bigger than the trial, bigger than the verdict, bigger than the federal case that was still unwinding through the courts with her name attached to it as consultant and witness and the person who had built the framework that made all of it possible. The story was this: a quiet woman in blue scrubs had looked at something wrong and decided it was not acceptable, and she had done something about it alone at significant personal cost without any guarantee that it would matter. And it had mattered. It had mattered in ways that were still expanding, still reaching into other hospitals, other states, other supply chains, other rooms where someone was lying in a bed not knowing why the treatment wasn't working. Other families who deserved an answer. That was the story. That was the whole of it. And it had not ended with the verdict, and it had not ended with the conference, and it would not end tonight on this porch with 2 cups of coffee going slowly cold in the autumn air. It would continue, the way. Important things continue not with fanfare, not with a finish line, but with the steady, daily, unglamorous insistence of people who understand that the work is the point and the work is never entirely done. And that is not a reason to stop. It would continue with Claire Bennett, who had never, not for a single moment since the night it all began, allowed herself the luxury of being only what people expected when they looked at her, who had been from the beginning exactly as strong as the situation required, and who had proven beyond any reasonable doubt that sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one strong enough and brave enough and patient enough and absolutely relentless enough to save everyone else.